I will not serve unsafe food.
Then you are finished.
Not yet. If that is the price, I will pay it.
Fire 6 scallops hard. Extra sauce. No one will know.
You gonna patch on you?
This man is confused. No one will be eating this.
Carter, back to the kitchen. Now. No.
Tonight's service has been paused for your safety.
Let them hear the truth.
I saw altered labels, unpaid hours, and unsafe food. That is out of context. Don't lie, it's all here. No, I didn't mean to.
Chef Thompson, tell them what you found.
Sauce can hide appearance. It cannot restore safety.
Before anyone knew my name, I walked in through the back door.
At 7 in the morning, before Manhattan had fully woken up, the lie inside one of its most famous kitchens had already begun to rot. The restaurant was called Maison Valeur, a glass and stone temple of fine dining tucked inside a luxury hotel near Central Park. Celebrities slipped through its private entrance. CEOs paid thousands for chef's table reservations. Food magazines called it a cathedral of modern American cuisine. By night, the dining room glowed with candles, crystal white linen, and plates arranged so beautifully that guests photographed them before taking a bite. But behind the swinging kitchen doors, beauty had become a mask. That morning, the staff was preparing for the most important dinner of the year. A private group of VIP guests would arrive that evening, including actors, investors, hotel owners, and 2 international food critics. Every dish had to be perfect, every sauce had to shine, every plate had to leave the past looking like a promise. At 7:03, an older black man stepped through the back entrance, wearing a worn chef's jacket, faded black pants, and kitchen shoes with cracked soles. He carried a small canvas knife roll in one hand and a folded transfer paper in the other. The room barely paused. Steam rose from stockpots, pans clattered. Prep cooks broke down cases of vegetables. A dishwasher dragged a rack of glasses toward the machine. At the center of it all stood Chef Victor Hayes, tall, sharp-faced, and famous enough to believe kindness was optional. The old man approached him and said, "Good morning. I'm Benjamin Carter. I was told to report here as the new prep cook from the Boston property." Victor looked him over from shoes to shoulders, then laughed once through his nose. He said, "They sent me someone's grandfather on VIP day." A few cooks glanced up. Some smiled because they were afraid not to. Benjamin kept his voice calm. "I can work wherever you need me." Victor stepped closer. "Where I need you is away from my line. Old men with slow hands ruin service. You can wash greens, carry stock, scrub pans, and stay out of the way. Touch my main station, and I'll send you back to whatever cafeteria you came from." The kitchen laughed more openly this time. Benjamin lowered his eyes, nodded, and took the crate of spinach Victor shoved toward him. No one in that kitchen knew that the old prep cook was not a transfer from Boston. He was Benjamin Carter, founder and chairman of Carter Hospitality, owner of more than 300 hotels, resorts, and restaurants across America. He owned the building, the kitchen, the logo on Victor's jacket, and the reputation Victor had been slowly poisoning for years. And he had not come to cook. He had come to decide whether Maison Valeur still deserved to carry the Carter name. Benjamin Carter understood kitchens before he understood boardrooms. His mother, Lorraine Carter, had cooked in a neighborhood diner in Harlem for 26 years. She left home before sunrise, came back smelling of onions, coffee, and fryer oil, and still had enough tenderness left to ask her children whether they had eaten. She did not have awards. She did not have critics writing about her sauces, but regular customers came back for her meatloaf, her biscuits, her collard greens, and the way she remembered who liked extra gravy without being asked. When Benjamin was 12, he started washing dishes in that same diner after school. He learned that a kitchen could reveal everything about a person. Some cooks became generous under pressure, others became cruel. Some chefs tasted before serving because they respected the guest. Others hid mistakes under sauce and hoped nobody noticed. Some people treated dishwashers like part of the team, others treated them like drains with hands. Lorraine told him, "Food carries the character of the hands that make it." He never forgot that. Years later, after building a small catering company, then a hotel group, then an empire, Benjamin still walked through kitchens whenever he could. Not dining rooms, kitchens. Dining rooms were designed to impress. Kitchens told the truth. He watched how chefs spoke to porters, whether staff meals were made with care, whether labels were honest, whether young cooks were taught or crushed. Maison Valeur had once made him proud. It had opened as the flagship restaurant of Carter Hospitality in New York, a place built on discipline, beauty, and respect. Then Victor Hayes arrived. At first, Victor seemed like a miracle. He was talented, ambitious, and photogenic. He knew how to talk to journalists. He brought sharper plating, bigger media attention, and higher revenue. Reservations became impossible to get. Guests praised the drama of his tasting menu. Investors loved him. But the numbers began telling another story. Staff turnover tripled. Overtime complaints vanished from records, even though labor hours increased. Vendor invoices looked strange. Guests quietly reported feeling sick after certain seafood courses, though the complaints were settled before reaching the public. A sous chef resigned without notice and sent one sentence to corporate human resources. "You should look at what Chef Hayes is doing before someone gets hurt." Benjamin read that sentence 3 times. He could have sent auditors. He did. He could have called the general manager. He did. He could have scheduled a formal inspection, but Victor knew how to perform when executives arrived. The fridges would be cleaned. The staff would be warned. The rotten parts would disappear until the suits left. So Benjamin chose another way. He put on an old uniform, entered through the service door, and became the kind of man arrogant people never guarded themselves around. By 8 o'clock, Victor had already assigned him the worst work in the kitchen. Benjamin washed cases of muddy spinach in cold water until his fingers ached. He lifted heavy stock pots from the walk-in. He scrubbed burnt pans no one else wanted to touch. He peeled shallots until his eyes burned. Every time he slowed to stretch his back, Victor noticed. Carter Victor shouted across the kitchen, "Did Boston teach you to move in slow motion?" Benjamin said, "I'm moving, chef." "Move faster. Guests pay for excellence, not arthritis." The cooks went quiet. A young pastry assistant looked down at her tray. A dishwasher named Mateo tightened his grip on a rack so hard his knuckles paled. Benjamin watched it all. Cruel kitchens have a rhythm. The fear travels before the chef does. People hear footsteps and stand straighter. They hide mistakes instead of fixing them. They stop asking questions. They learn that truth is dangerous, so they give the person in charge whatever lie keeps service moving. By mid-morning, Benjamin saw how Victor ruled. He did not train. He threatened. He did not correct. He humiliated. A line cook who overcooked asparagus was told he had the palate of a vending machine. A prep cook who asked about an allergy substitution was called too stupid to read a ticket. Mateo burned his wrist on a tray and tried to keep working because Victor had once sent a dishwasher home for making pain everyone else's problem. The staff moved quickly, but not with pride. They moved like people trying to survive weather. Only one cook stepped out of that weather. Her name was Aisha Thompson. She was 26, a junior line cook on Garde Manger, new to Maison Valeur, but not new to kitchens. She had grown up in Queens above her aunt's small Caribbean takeout shop, where she learned to chop scallions before she learned algebra. She had gone to culinary school on scholarships, worked catering jobs on weekends, and spent a year cooking in a hospital kitchen before fighting her way into fine dining. Victor treated her like she had slipped in through the wrong door. He corrected her more harshly than others. He gave her prep lists no one could finish on time. He called her community center when she seasoned anything boldly. But Aisha had the rare calm of someone who knew why she was there. She wanted to cook food that was honest, beautiful, and safe. She wanted to prove that discipline did not have to sound like abuse. When Benjamin struggled to lift a crate of squash, Aisha crossed the kitchen and grabbed the other side. "I've got it," she said. Victor saw immediately. "Aisha, are you running a charity program now?" She did not let go of the crate. "No, chef. I'm making sure the squash gets to prep." A few cooks hid smiles. Benjamin looked at her. "Thank you," she shrugged softly. Heavy things get lighter when people stop pretending they're heroes. Later, when staff meal came out, Victor made sure Benjamin received the last portion, a cold scoop of rice and scraps from overcooked chicken. Benjamin sat on an overturned bucket near the dry storage room and opened the container without complaint. Aisha noticed. She walked over with her own plate and divided it in half before he could refuse. "You need protein if they're going to make you carry half the building," she said. Benjamin smiled. "You always feed strangers. My grandmother said you can tell the truth about a kitchen by how it feeds people who can't pay." Benjamin looked down at the food, then back at her. "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was terrifying," Aisha said, which is sometimes the same thing. For the first time that day, Benjamin laughed. The laugh was small, but it mattered. In that kitchen, laughter had become a weapon. Aisha used it like a window. As the day moved toward service, Benjamin began seeing the deeper rot. Near the walk-in, he noticed labels placed over older labels. Salmon, marked as delivered that morning, had frostburn on the edges. A box of imported mushrooms had been replaced with cheaper domestic ones, but the tasting menu still listed them as rare European morels. A container of sauce had yesterday's date scratched away and rewritten. In the dry storage office, Victor met briefly with a vendor who handed him an envelope before leaving through the back. Benjamin did not react. He memorized invoice numbers. He noted times. He watched which staff looked ashamed and which looked practiced. At noon, he followed Mateo to the dish pit and found the dishwasher rinsing his burned wrist under cold water. "Does Chef know?" Benjamin asked. Mateo gave a bitter smile. "Chef knows everything, except how to care. That needs treatment." "I clocked out already." Benjamin frowned. "You're still working." Mateo glanced toward the line. "We all clock out before deep clean. If payroll sees the real hours, Chef says corporate will cut staff." Benjamin knew that was a lie. Corporate had approved overtime for VIP week. If employees were working unpaid, someone had decided their exhaustion was cheaper than honesty. He asked quietly, "How long has this been happening?" Mateo looked at him with tired eyes. "Long enough that people stopped calling it happening." That sentence stayed with Benjamin. By afternoon, the kitchen's energy sharpened. VIP service was approaching. The dining room team polished glasses, florists adjusted arrangements near the private room, the general manager rehearsed greetings. Victor changed into a fresh chef's coat, embroidered with his name, and reminded everyone that tonight could bring a national feature. "This is not dinner," he told the staff. "This is history. Do not embarrass me." Not the restaurant, not the team, not the guests. Me. Benjamin heard the word clearly. The signature first course was supposed to be seared diver scallop with celery root cream caviar, preserved lemon, and a champagne beurre blanc. It was a delicate dish. Clean seafood, soft acid, warm butter, salt from the caviar, a plate that depended on freshness because there was nowhere for bad ingredients to hide. Aisha was assigned to prepare the scallops. When she opened the container, she stopped. The smell was faint, but wrong, not dramatic. Not the kind of smell that would make a whole kitchen turn, just enough for someone careful to know the sea had started moving in the wrong direction. She checked the label. "Delivered today." Then she looked underneath. An older label showed a delivery date 4 days earlier. Aisha's face tightened. She carried the container to Victor. "Chef, these scallops are past safe use." Victor did not even look up from plating tests. "They're fine." They were relabeled. He turned slowly. "Excuse me, these are not today's scallops." Victor walked to her station, lowered his voice, and smiled in a way that made nearby cooks look down. Aisha, do you want to cook in serious restaurants? Yes, chef. Then learn serious restaurant reality. Product gets managed. Labels get corrected. Waste gets controlled. You sear them properly, sauce them properly, and guests will call them the best scallops of their lives. I won't serve these. The kitchen went still. Victor stared at her. Say that again. Aisha's hands were steady, though Benjamin could see the fear in her throat. I won't serve unsafe food. Victor stepped closer. You are a junior cook who has been here 5 minutes. I have cooked for presidents, actors, billionaires, and critics who could end your career with a paragraph. Do you think your little moral speech matters tonight? Aisha looked at the scallops, then at him. A dish takes minutes to make. One dishonest plate can take a lifetime from your name. Benjamin stood near the prep table with a towel in his hand, listening. Victor's face darkened. You're done after service. If that's the price, Aisha said, I'll pay it. Victor grabbed the container. Then watch someone with courage do your job. He turned to another cook. Fire 6 scallops hard, deep color, extra sauce. No one will know. Benjamin Carter had heard enough, but he still waited, because justice in a kitchen like cooking depends on timing. At 6:30, the VIP guests began arriving. The dining room glowed. The private room filled with expensive perfume, tailored jackets, camera flashes, and the low murmur of people used to being treated as important. Victor stood near the pass, performing calm for anyone who looked through the open kitchen window. The first plate of scallops came up under his supervision. It was beautiful. 3 golden scallops sat in a crescent of cream. The sauce shone. The caviar looked like black pearls. Microgreens leaned exactly where Victor wanted them. To a guest, it would have looked like luxury. To Benjamin, it looked like betrayal arranged on porcelain. Victor wiped the rim and said, Run it. Aisha did not move. The food runner reached for the plate. Benjamin stepped forward and picked it up first. Victor snapped. Carter, put that down. Benjamin held the plate steady. This one should not leave the kitchen. Victor laughed with disbelief. You don't decide what leaves my kitchen. No, Benjamin said. Not as a prep cook. He walked through the swinging doors into the dining room carrying the plate. The kitchen froze behind him. The dining room conversation softened as the old man in the worn chef's coat crossed the floor. He did not hurry. He did not spill a drop of sauce. He stopped beside the private room where the guests were waiting for the first course and placed the plate on a small service table. Victor stormed out after him, red-faced but trying to keep his voice controlled in front of important people. I apologize, everyone, Victor said. We have a staff issue. This man is confused. Benjamin looked at the guests, then at the plate. No one will be eating this. Victor's smile twitched. Carter, back to the kitchen. Now. At that moment, the restaurant's main screens, normally used for wine presentations and private event branding, went dark. Then the Carter Hospitality logo appeared. The general manager turned pale. A woman in a tailored black suit entered from the side door with 2 attorneys, the corporate director of food safety and a city health inspector. Behind them came 2 security officers. The woman stepped forward and said, Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Diane Mercer, General Counsel for Carter Hospitality. Please remain seated. Tonight's service has been paused for your safety. Victor looked from Diane to Benjamin, then back again. Benjamin slowly untied the stained apron around his waist. He removed the old prep cook jacket. Diane handed him a dark suit coat. He put it on without hurry. The room understood before anyone said the name. Diane spoke clearly. This is Benjamin Carter, founder and chairman of Carter Hospitality. The dining room went silent. Victor took 1 step back. Benjamin rested one hand near the plate. For one day I worked in my own kitchen as a prep cook. I was mocked for my age, assigned work meant to degrade me, and told to stay away from the line. That is not why tonight's service has stopped. His voice remained controlled, but every word carried. I saw employees threatened, injured, and forced to work unpaid hours. I saw ingredients substituted while guests were charged for something better. I saw labels altered. I saw staff pressured to hide safety concerns. And tonight, I watched Chef Hayes order this plate to be served after being told the scallops were unsafe. The screens changed. There was no need for drama. The evidence was colder than drama. Photos of relabeled containers, vendor invoices showing premium seafood billed while cheaper product arrived, payroll records showing staff clocked out while security footage showed them still cleaning, messages from Victor ordering employees to make labels match the story, a clip of Aisha refusing to serve the scallops, a clip of Victor saying guests will never know. Guests turned toward the plate as if it had become something alive and dangerous. Victor finally spoke. This is taken out of context. Every kitchen manages waste. Every chef pushes staff. You know what standards require. Benjamin looked at him with sadness, not surprise. Standards do not require theft. They do not require abuse. They do not require unsafe food. Victor pointed toward Aisha, who stood near the kitchen door, still in her apron. She's inexperienced. She panicked over products she didn't understand. Benjamin turned to Aisha. Chef Thompson, would you explain what you found? Aisha swallowed. Every eye in the room moved to her. For a moment, she looked like the young cook Victor had tried to make small. Then she stepped forward. The scallops had been relabeled, she said. The original date showed they were outside our safe service window. The odor had started to turn. With seafood, especially scallops, you do not gamble. Searing and sauce can hide appearance, but they do not restore safety. The health inspector nodded slightly. Benjamin looked back at Victor. That is what leadership sounds like. Victor's jaw tightened. Diane opened a folder. Victor Hayes, you are terminated for cause effective immediately. Carter Hospitality is referring evidence of wage violations, food safety violations, vendor fraud, and misappropriation of company funds to the appropriate authorities. You are to leave the premises with security. The man who had spent years making others tremble suddenly looked unsteady himself. You can't do this, Victor said. I made this restaurant. Benjamin's voice hardened. You made people afraid to tell the truth. That is not the same thing. Security approached. Victor looked toward the kitchen, perhaps expecting loyalty. No one moved. Mateo stood with a bandage on his wrist. The pastry assistant stared at the floor. The line cooks watched him with the exhausted silence of people seeing a storm finally pass. As Victor was escorted out, he turned once toward Benjamin. You'll ruin the restaurant. Benjamin looked at the untouched plate. No, I'm trying to save what you nearly ruined. That night, Maison Valeur did not serve the VIP tasting menu. Benjamin walked back into the kitchen and gathered the staff. Some expected anger, some expected layoffs. A few looked ready to apologize for things they had done only because they were afraid. Benjamin stood where Victor usually stood, but he did not raise his voice. First, he said, no guest will eat food we cannot stand behind. Second, every employee who worked unpaid hours will be paid back in full. Third, anyone who reports retaliation, falsified labels, unsafe product, or wage abuse will have direct protection from corporate. Fourth, this restaurant will close for a full audit and reopen only when the kitchen is worthy of the dining room. No one clapped at first. They were too stunned. Then Mateo began to cry quietly. Benjamin walked over to him. Your wrist needs medical care. Mateo wiped his face quickly, embarrassed. I'm okay, sir. No, Benjamin said. You are injured. There is a difference. That difference traveled through the room. For years, the staff had been taught that pain was weakness, exhaustion was loyalty, and silence was professionalism. In one sentence, Benjamin began undoing the lie. Then he turned to Aisha. You were told you were inexperienced because you refused to be dishonest, he said. That is not inexperience. That is the foundation of this profession. Aisha shook her head. Mr. Carter, I only did what any cook should do. Benjamin smiled. Exactly. And tonight, too many people forgot what any cook should do. He announced that Aisha would become acting chef de cuisine during the restaurant's rebuilding period, supported by Carter Hospitality's senior culinary director. It was not a symbolic promotion. It was a responsibility. She would help redesign kitchen systems, rebuild vendor standards, retrain staff, and create a culture where no cook had to choose between a paycheck and a lie. Aisha's eyes filled. I don't know if I'm ready. Benjamin looked around the kitchen. Good. People who are too certain they are ready often stop learning. You know food, you know safety, you know respect. The rest can be taught. For the first time all day, the kitchen applauded. Not loudly at first. It began with the dishwasher, then the pastry assistant, then the line cooks, then the servers standing near the door. It was not the applause of a dining room praising performance. It was relief. It was recognition. It was the sound of people realizing the person in charge might finally see them. Maison Valère closed the next morning. The newspapers got part of the story, but not all of it. They wrote about Victor's fall, the investigation, the famous guests whose dinner was stopped, and the billionaire who disguised himself as a prep cook. They loved that part. People always loved the costume more than the lesson. But inside Carter Hospitality, the real work was quieter. Payroll was audited. Back pay was issued. Vendor contracts were reviewed. The seafood supplier connected to Victor's scheme was terminated. A whistleblower channel was created for kitchen staff across every Carter property. Time clocks were moved out of managers' control. Food labeling was redesigned so dates could not be altered without trace. Every executive chef in the group was required to attend a new training program called the Carter Standard, built around one sentence from Benjamin's mother. Food carries the character of the hands that make it. Aisha worked harder than she ever had in her life. The title did not make the work easier. Some people doubted her. A few senior cooks resented taking direction from someone younger. Critics speculated that Benjamin had promoted her for a story. She answered the only way she knew how, by showing up before dawn, tasting everything, asking questions, studying costs, respecting the dishwashers, and refusing to let fear run the pass. Her first major decision surprised everyone. She changed staff meal. Under Victor's staff meal had been leftovers thrown into pans without care, often cold, often late, sometimes skipped entirely. Aisha made it mandatory that the team sit together before service for 10 minutes and eat something prepared with intention. It did not have to be fancy, rice and beans, soup, roast chicken, braised greens, but it had to be food, not scraps. When someone asked why that mattered, Aisha said, "If we feed each other like we don't matter, eventually we'll cook for guests the same way." Benjamin heard about that and smiled for the rest of the day. 6 weeks later, Maison Valère reopened. The dining room looked almost the same. Same candles, same crystal, same white linen. But the kitchen sounded different. It was still intense. Real kitchens are not gentle places during service. Tickets still printed fast, pans still hissed, cooks still moved with urgency, but the fear had changed into focus. Aisha led from the pass with calm precision. 2 salmon, 1 lamb, 1 tasting menu, fire, table 12. Yes, chef. Taste the sauce before it leaves. Yes, chef. Mateo, how's your wrist? Strong, chef. Good. Don't be a hero. Ask for help with the racks. Yes, chef. Benjamin sat in the dining room that night at a corner table. He did not announce himself. He watched guests eat, watched servers breathe easier, watched plates return empty. When Aisha sent out the final savory course, Benjamin recognized the spirit of it immediately. It was not the old scallop dish. It was a simple, elegant plate of roasted black bass with charred spring onion lemon broth and a small spoonful of rice seasoned the way Aisha's grandmother had taught her. Beautiful, but not arrogant. Refined, but still warm. Fine dining that remembered food was meant to nourish before it impressed. After service, Aisha came to his table. "Well?" she asked, trying to sound brave. Benjamin took his time folding his napkin. "My mother would have asked for more broth." Aisha's face fell for half a second. Then Benjamin smiled. That was her highest compliment. Aisha laughed and the tension broke. Months later, Maison Velour earned back the trust Victor had nearly destroyed, not because the scandal disappeared, but because the restaurant did not pretend it had never happened. Guests were told about the safety reforms, staff retention improved, former employees received apologies and payments. Matteo became a stewarding supervisor. The pastry assistant Victor once mocked became a junior pastry chef. Aisha's food began receiving attention for a quality critics struggled to describe. One critic finally wrote, "The new Maison Velour cooks with conscience." Benjamin framed that review not because of the praise, but because of the word, conscience. That was what Victor had never understood. Talent could sharpen a knife, build a sauce, earn applause, and fill a reservation book. But talent without conscience could poison everything it touched. It could turn beauty into deception. It could turn leadership into fear. It could turn a plate of food into evidence. Years later, when young cooks asked Aisha what made a great chef, she never began with technique. She told them about the morning an old prep cook walked into a famous kitchen and was told he was only good for washing vegetables and taking out trash. She told them about a scallop dish that looked perfect and was completely wrong. She told them about the difference between making food beautiful and making food honestly. Then she would say, "Never serve a lie, not on a plate, not on a menu, not in the way you treat the person standing beside you." That lesson traveled through every kitchen she led. Because a restaurant is not great because the chairs are expensive. It is not great because famous people eat there. It is not great because critics write poetry about the sauce. A restaurant becomes great when the people inside it understand that every plate is an act of trust. The guest trusts the chef not to deceive them. The server trusts the kitchen not to send out danger. The dishwasher trusts the chef to see their labor. The young cook trusts that asking a safety question will not cost them their future. And the leader trusts that integrity is worth more than a perfect photograph of a plate. Benjamin Carter did not fire Victor Hayes because Victor insulted him. He fired him because Victor had forgotten that food is sacred in the simplest human way. People put it into their bodies. They serve it to their families. They celebrate with it, mourn with it, fall in love over it, and remember childhood through it. To corrupt that trust for ego or money is not a small mistake. It is a betrayal. And Aisha Thompson did not become a leader because she knew the billionaire's secret. She became a leader because she protected people who would never know her name. She protected guests before they became victims. She protected the honor of the kitchen when the most powerful man in it told her to stay quiet. That is character. Not the kind announced in interviews, not the kind embroidered on a chef's coat. The kind shown when the pan is hot, the clock is running, the boss is angry, and doing the right thing might cost you everything. So if this story stays with you, let it stay in the next small decision. The label you are tempted to change. The shortcut no one will notice. The worker you are tempted to ignore. The customer who trusts you because they cannot see what happens behind the door. Success may be built with talent, but it survives only through honesty. And in every profession, whether you cook food, clean floors, teach children, sell cars, guard doors, or lead companies, character is the one ingredient that cannot be replaced. If you believe every honest worker deserves respect and that no success is worth losing your conscience, leave a comment and share this story. It may remind someone that the most important flavor in any work is not fame, money, or power. It is integrity.
Who let him in here? Look carefully.
You didn't think I'd just let you take everything. Grandfather?
I stood outside this building for 2 weeks.
This is entrapment.
know. This revealed a habit.
I never asked for this.
Authority has to be earned.
Bring Denise in.
Before they knew my name, they showed me the truth. Today, I am nobody. But that changes now. Let them think I have nothing to give.
The rain was coming down hard over downtown Atlanta the morning Nathan Kingston stood outside the glass doors of his own company and pretended to be a man no one had to respect. His old yellow raincoat clung to his shoulders. A cracked plastic pouch hung from his neck filled with lottery tickets damp around the edges. His hands shook a little, partly from age, partly from the cold, and partly because he already knew this test might break his heart. Behind him, rising above Peachtree Street, like a monument to everything he had survived, stood the headquarters of Kingston Group, a $30 billion empire with his name carved into the stone at the entrance. Men in suits hurried past him without looking. Employees ducked under umbrellas, badges pressed to their coats. Security guards watched the curb. And Nathan, the founder, the chairman, the old king everyone called untouchable, stood there as a poor lottery seller and waited for his 3 grandsons. The first to arrive was Marcus Kingston, the eldest. His black luxury sedan stopped so close to the curb that water splashed over Nathan's shoes. Marcus stepped out in a tailored coat, eyes already on his phone, jaw tight with the impatience of a man who believed the world was always too slow for him. Nathan took one careful step forward, lifted a lottery ticket between 2 fingers, and said in a soft voice, "Son, would you buy one from me today? It's my birthday." Marcus barely looked at his face. He saw the raincoat. He saw the wet shoes. He saw the trembling hand near his polished car. Then he slapped Nathan's wrist away so sharply that the ticket fluttered onto the sidewalk. "Get away from me," he snapped. "Don't make my car smell like the street." And before Nathan could bend down, Marcus walked past him into the building named after the man he had just humiliated. A few minutes later, Jordan Kingston arrived in a silver coupe, smiling for a photographer who happened to be outside filming a lifestyle segment about young executives in Atlanta. Jordan was the kind of man who knew exactly when to soften his voice and exactly where a camera might be hiding. Nathan approached him too. Same ticket, same request. "Young man, would you help me out with 1 ticket? It's my birthday and I'm trying to sell enough to go home early." Jordan's smile did not disappear. That was what made it colder. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill and let it fall to the wet pavement. "There," he said quietly, still angled toward the camera. "Take it and move along. People are trying to work." Then he stepped over the bill as if it had already become part of the sidewalk. Nathan stared at the money in the rain. For a moment he remembered another sidewalk, another morning, another man dropping coins as if kindness were something dirty you could throw from a safe distance. He was still staring when a 3rd car pulled up, older than the others, clean but not flashy. Elijah Kingston got out without an umbrella. He saw Nathan before he saw the building. He saw the fallen bill, the ticket on the ground, and the old man's wet sleeve. Elijah bent down first. Not for show, not with a sigh. He picked up the 20, wiped it against his coat, and placed it directly into Nathan's palm. Then he picked up the lottery ticket Marcus had knocked away and tucked it carefully back into the plastic pouch. "Sir, you don't have to sell me anything," he said. "It's raining too hard. Please get somewhere warm, and happy birthday." Nathan looked at his youngest grandson, the one most people in the family treated as too soft to lead, and held his gaze for just 1 second longer than a stranger should have. Elijah did not recognize him. The gray beard was fuller, the glasses cheaper, the cap pulled low, the familiar voice made rough by rehearsal and age. To Elijah, he was only an old man standing in the rain. That was exactly what Nathan needed him to see. No one outside that building knew the lottery seller was Nathan Kingston. No one knew he had built Kingston Group from a one-room shipping office into a global logistics, real estate, and technology empire. No one knew he had suffered a heart attack 3 weeks earlier and awakened in a hospital bed with one terrifying thought pressing harder than the pain in his chest. His company might outlive him, but its soul might not. For years, Nathan had told himself he still had time. Time to train the boys. Time to correct their arrogance. Time to teach them that wealth was not a crown, but a weight. Marcus was sharp, disciplined, and ruthless with numbers. Jordan was charming, strategic, and adored by the press. Elijah was quieter, more patient, and often dismissed because he listened before he spoke. All three had degrees. All three had offices inside Kingston Group. All three carried the Kingston name like a passkey. But Nathan had begun to fear that only one of them understood what the name had cost. He had grown up in a narrow house on the south side of Atlanta, where rain came through the kitchen ceiling and his mother put bowls under the leaks before she put food on the table. His father had cleaned railway cars at night and sold used tires on weekends. Nathan's first business was not glamorous. He delivered papers before school, shined shoes outside bus stations, and carried packages for shop owners who called him Boy until he was old enough to make them call him Mr. Kingston. He had been poor long enough to know poverty was not laziness. Poverty was waking up tired, working hard, and still being treated as if your struggle proved your worthlessness. That lesson built the company. In the early days, when Kingston Freight had only 2 trucks and 1 receptionist, Nathan knew every driver's child by name. He fixed tires himself on the shoulder of highways. He paid workers before he paid himself. He remembered a janitor who once shared half a sandwich with him when a bank rejected his loan. He remembered a waitress who let him sit in a diner for 3 hours during a storm because he had nowhere else to meet a potential investor. He remembered every ordinary kindness that kept him from giving up. Then the company grew. The offices became towers. The trucks became fleets. The family house became a mansion behind iron gates. His children learned comfort before sacrifice. His grandchildren learned legacy before hunger. And somewhere between the private schools, the executive dining rooms, and the annual charity galas where smiling guests applauded donations they would never personally feel, Nathan began to sense that the Kingston name was becoming polished on the outside and hollow in the center. The heart attack forced him to stop ignoring it. He had collapsed in his study while reviewing succession papers. His assistant, Clara Whitmore, found him on the floor beside a folder labeled Future Leadership Structure. When he woke in the hospital, Marcus was arguing with a doctor about a delayed update. Jordan was on the phone, arranging a press statement that made the emergency sound calm and brand safe. Elijah was sitting by the bed, silent, holding Nathan's old wedding ring in his palm, because the nurses had removed it during treatment and he did not want it misplaced. Nathan did not announce what he had noticed. He had spent a lifetime learning that people showed you more truth when they thought no one important was watching. So 2 days after returning home against medical advice and Clara's furious warnings, he created one final test. Not a business simulation, not a board interview, not a charity event where everyone knew how to behave. He would stand at the front door of Kingston Group as a man without power and ask each grandson for the smallest kind of help. The lottery tickets were not random. When Nathan was 19, before anyone trusted him with contracts or loans, he had sold lottery tickets for a corner store on weekends. He hated it then, standing for hours while people looked through him. But he had learned something valuable there. A person's character often appeared in the split second before they decided whether someone beneath them mattered. Some people bought a ticket because they wanted luck. Some bought one because they felt pity. Some refused politely, some refused with contempt as if saying no required them to crush the person asking. Nathan never forgot the difference. For 2 weeks he became that man again. Each morning before sunrise, Clara drove him to a small rented apartment near the office where he changed out of his expensive clothes. She hated the plan, but she respected the reason behind it. She helped him glue a rough gray beard along his jaw, stain his hands with harmless dye, and choose clothes that looked clean but worn thin by years of use. His private security chief arranged discreet protection from across the street, but Nathan insisted the guards keep their distance. If people saw security hovering, the test would be ruined. On the first day, Marcus failed so quickly that Nathan almost wished he had chosen another method. The slap on his wrist was not just irritation, it was instinct. Marcus had not paused to ask whether the old man was hungry, cold, confused, or desperate. He had only seen a threat to the shine of his car. Nathan went home that evening and sat in his study with the damp lottery ticket on his desk. The place where Marcus's hand struck him had turned red. He touched it gently and thought of Marcus as a child, 5 years old, asleep on Nathan's chest after his parents left him at the mansion during one of their long business trips. He wondered when that little boy had learned to measure people by inconvenience. Jordan's failure was quieter, which somehow made it worse. Marcus's cruelty came out like a raised fist. Jordan's came wrapped in manners. He always knew how to appear generous without giving respect. The $20 bill he dropped was worth more than the ticket, but less than basic human decency. Nathan had watched Jordan speak beautifully at charity dinners about economic opportunity. He had watched him pose beside scholarship students and call them the future. Yet outside the building, when no donor cameras were close enough to hear the truth, Jordan treated a poor old man like a stain to be removed. Elijah surprised Nathan, not because he was kind once, but because he stayed kind when there was nothing to gain. The next morning, Nathan returned to the same spot. The rain had stopped, but the air was cold enough to make his knuckles ache. Marcus entered through the underground garage to avoid him. Jordan sent an assistant ahead to clear the entrance, as if the public sidewalk had become an obstacle to his convenience. Elijah arrived with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Nathan without ceremony. "I don't know how you take it," he said, "so I brought cream and sugar on the side." Then he bought 1 ticket, folded it, and slipped it into his wallet without checking the numbers. Nathan asked, "You play often?" Elijah smiled a little. "No, sir. I lose often. That's different." It was a small joke, but not a mocking one. Nathan laughed despite himself. Elijah asked his name. Nathan told him. "People call me Nate." It was not exactly a lie. Before he became Mr. Kingston, before newspapers called him a titan, before lawyers filled rooms on his behalf, everyone who loved him had called him Nate. After that, Elijah bought a ticket every morning. Sometimes he paid full price. Sometimes, when Nathan pretended to be short on change, Elijah told him to keep it. Once he noticed Nathan rubbing his chest and immediately asked if he needed a doctor. Nathan waved him away, but Elijah would not leave until he had called a nearby clinic and written the address on the back of a business card. Another morning, when wind scattered several tickets across the pavement, Elijah ran after them while executives stepped around the mess, as if chasing paper belonged to a lower species. Nathan watched all of it carefully. Kindness alone was not enough to run Kingston Group. He knew that. A gentle fool could destroy a company as surely as a cruel genius. So he watched Elijah in other ways too. From the security feeds and internal reports Clara collected, Nathan saw how each grandson behaved inside the tower. Marcus ran the finance division like a battlefield. His numbers were impressive. He reduced costs, increased margins, and spoke to the board in sentences sharp enough to cut glass. But the costs he reduced had names. Drivers lost overtime. Call center staff lost break flexibility. Cleaning contracts were renegotiated until the workers who emptied executive trash at night could barely afford bus fare. When a facilities manager warned that the cuts were hurting morale, Marcus wrote in an email, "Morale is not a balance sheet line." He thought that was leadership. Jordan oversaw communications and public strategy. He knew how to tell a story, especially one that made him look compassionate. He arranged interviews about Kingston Group's commitment to community investment, then complained privately that low-income neighborhoods were bad optics unless there's a camera plan. He chaired a foundation event for struggling entrepreneurs and later joked that most poor people only needed discipline and better branding. People laughed because he was a Kingston. Nathan did not. Elijah worked in operations, the least glamorous of the three roles. He handled warehouse delays, driver disputes, vendor negotiations, and the messy human problems Marcus called inefficiencies. He was not soft in business. That was the thing people missed. He could read contracts, spot waste, and push back when suppliers inflated costs. But he had a habit Nathan respected before making a decision about labor. He asked who would carry the burden. He visited distribution centers without warning. He learned which loading dock flooded during heavy rain. He knew that a late payment to a small vendor could mean someone missing rent. He was not perfect, but he paid attention. The family, however, did not value attention as much as dominance. At Sunday dinners, Marcus spoke as if the CEO chair already belonged to him. Jordan treated succession like a campaign he expected to win through charm. Their father, Nathan's only surviving son, had died years earlier, leaving the brothers to grow up under the long shadow of their grandfather's success. Family members whispered that Marcus had the strength, Jordan had the polish, and Elijah had the heart, as if the heart were a decorative quality best kept away from the control room. Nathan had allowed that thinking to spread because he was tired. That was one of the regrets that kept him awake after the heart attack. He had corrected balance sheets faster than he corrected character. He had built schools and hospitals with donations, yet inside his own family he had let arrogance pass as ambition. Now, standing outside his own building in a cheap cap, he was seeing the bill come due. On the fourth day of the test, a woman from housekeeping came out during her break and bought 2 tickets from Nathan. Her name was Denise. She recognized him only as the old man who had been standing near the entrance all week. She apologized for not buying earlier because payday had not come yet. Nathan told her there was nothing to apologize for. She laughed and said the executives upstairs never apologized for anything, so maybe someone should. A few minutes later, Marcus came through the front doors with 2 board members. Denise stepped aside quickly, but her mop bucket clipped the edge of Marcus's shoe. It left a faint streak of water on the leather. Marcus stopped as if she had insulted his bloodline. He did not shout because board members were present, but his voice dropped into something worse. He told her people like her were paid to be invisible, and if she could not manage that, he would find a contractor who could. Nathan stood 5 feet away with lottery tickets in his hand. Denise lowered her eyes. The board members pretended not to hear. Marcus walked on. The old Nathan, the chairman, could have ended Marcus's career that morning with 1 phone call. But the disguised Nathan stayed still because he needed to know whether this was a moment or a pattern. By the end of the week, he knew. Jordan's pattern appeared at a charity photo shoot in the lobby. Kingston Group was announcing a new small business grant program, and Jordan had invited local vendors to stand behind him as proof of community partnership. Nathan watched from outside as caterers arranged coffee fruit and small pastries on a table no one from the invited neighborhood groups seemed allowed to touch. When one elderly street vendor asked if she could take a bottle of water, Jordan's assistant hesitated. Jordan noticed, smiled for the photographer, handed the woman the water himself, then leaned close when the camera lowered and told the assistant, "Next time, screen these people better. They look desperate." Nathan felt something old and hot rise in his chest. Not the pain from his heart attack, something more dangerous. Memory. He remembered being screened out of banks, screened out of clubs, screened out of rooms where decisions were made about money he needed and talent he had. The word desperate had followed him for half his youth. People used it when they wanted to shame hunger without admitting they had never missed a meal. That afternoon, Elijah found Nathan sitting on a bench half a block away, his ticket pouch closed. "You okay, Mr. Nate?" he asked. Nathan could have said yes and ended the conversation. Instead, he said, "Some days, people make you feel smaller than you are." Elijah sat beside him, though he was due upstairs for a meeting. He did not offer a motivational speech. He did not tell Nathan to ignore them. He just sat there for a moment and let the old man be tired. Then he said, "My grandfather used to say, the world gets mean when people forget who helped them survive." Nathan turned his face toward the traffic, so Elijah would not see what that sentence did to him. "Your grandfather sounds wise." "He is," Elijah said. "Stubborn, too." Nathan almost smiled. "Most wise men are." Elijah bought 3 tickets that day, one for himself, one for Denise from housekeeping, and one he asked Nathan to keep. "For your birthday week," he said. "Maybe luck owes you interest." The next test came by accident, which made it more useful than anything Nathan had planned. On Monday, city enforcement officers moved along the sidewalk, checking permits for street vendors. Nathan's papers were in order, arranged by Clara with the kind of precision only a lifelong executive assistant could produce. But Marcus saw the officers and seized the moment. He had just arrived with 2 investors from New York, and Nathan's presence near the entrance clearly embarrassed him. Marcus approached one officer and said loudly enough for Nathan to hear, "We've had complaints about this man blocking access. This is private corporate frontage. Remove him." The officer looked uncertain. The sidewalk was public. Nathan was not blocking the door, but Marcus spoke with the confidence of a man accustomed to bending rules around his comfort. Nathan kept his head down and played the role. He apologized. He said he would move if he had to. Marcus's mouth tightened with satisfaction. Then Elijah came out of the building. He did not know Marcus had caused it. He only saw 2 officers questioning an elderly vendor whose hands were shaking as he searched for documents. Elijah crossed the sidewalk, greeted the officers respectfully, and asked what the issue was. When one explained, Elijah looked toward the entrance and said, "This is public frontage. He has as much right to stand here as anyone else, as long as he is licensed." He helped Nathan unfold the permit, noticed the date, and handed it over. Marcus's face hardened. "Elijah, stay out of this." Elijah turned. There were investors present, employees passing, cameras in the lobby. It would have been easier to step back. Instead, he said calmly, "If our company needs an old man removed from a public sidewalk so we can look powerful, then we're not powerful, we're fragile." The sentence traveled through the air like a dropped glass. Marcus stared at him with disbelief. Jordan, who had just entered through the revolving door, saw the small crowd and immediately began calculating optics. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder as if they were all united in compassion. "Of course Mr. Nate can stay," Jordan said smoothly, though Nathan had never told Jordan that name. "Kingston Group supports local enterprise." Nathan noticed the lie. Elijah noticed it too, but said nothing. The officers left. Marcus walked inside without looking at Nathan. Jordan lingered just long enough to be seen smiling beside the poor vendor, then whispered as he passed, "You're lucky my brother made this sentimental." Elijah stayed behind. "Did they scare you?" Nathan looked down at the permit in his hand. "At my age, son, you learn fear is usually just a visitor. Shame stays longer." Elijah absorbed that quietly. "Then don't carry any that doesn't belong to you." That night, Nathan sat alone in his mansion's kitchen instead of the dining room. The house was too big now. His wife Ruth had been gone for 8 years, and without her laughter, the marble floors seemed colder. Ruth had been the only person who could call him out without fear. She used to say, "Nate, if this family ever starts treating workers like furniture, burn the whole table." He wished she were there to see Elijah. He wished she were there to warn him not to let anger make the decision for him, because anger was easy. Marcus and Jordan had given him enough reasons to cut them out. But Nathan did not want revenge. Revenge was a small inheritance. He wanted truth. He wanted to know whether the company could be trusted to someone who would preserve more than profit. So he planned one final test, not outside the building, but on the street, where no executive title could follow them. On Thursday morning, Nathan carried an old brown wallet in his coat pocket. Inside were $42, a worn photograph of himself and Ruth from 1974, and a medical appointment card with the name Nate Lewis printed on it. Clara had objected to the risk of letting the wallet leave his hand. Nathan told her the risk was the point. He waited until all three grandsons were near the entrance at the same time. Marcus was arriving from a breakfast meeting. Jordan was speaking with a reporter about youth leadership in business. Elijah was crossing from the parking deck with a folder under his arm. Nathan shuffled past them, pretended to stumble, and let the wallet fall onto the wet pavement. Marcus saw it first. Nathan saw his eyes move. He saw the quick calculation. Marcus bent down, picked it up, and opened it. There was no hesitation of concern, no call after the old man, no instinct to return what was lost. He thumbed through the bills, saw there was little money, and gave a short, disgusted laugh. "Not even worth the trouble," he muttered. But he slipped the wallet into his coat anyway, perhaps because taking was easier than returning. Jordan saw Marcus do it. His expression flickered. For 1 second, Nathan thought Jordan might intervene. Instead, Jordan looked toward the reporter, adjusted his smile, and continued speaking about the Kingston family's deep commitment to ethical leadership. He did not steal the wallet, but he allowed the theft to become someone else's problem. Nathan had learned long ago that cowardice in a polished suit could do as much damage as open cruelty. Elijah noticed last. He saw Nathan patting his pockets near the corner, saw Marcus turning away, saw enough confusion to understand. "Marcus," he called, "did that man drop something?" Marcus stopped. "Don't start." "Did he?" Jordan laughed under his breath. "Elijah, please, we have meetings." Elijah walked to Marcus and held out his hand. "Give it back." The reporter lowered her microphone. Employees slowed. Marcus's face darkened. "You're accusing me in public." "I'm asking you in public," Elijah said, voice steady. "There's a difference." For a moment, the brothers stood there in the rain-washed morning, all their childhood roles alive between them. Marcus, the commanding eldest. Jordan, the charming escape artist. Elijah, the one expected to smooth things over. But Elijah did not smooth it over. He waited. Marcus pulled out the wallet and shoved it against Elijah's chest. "Fine. Go rescue your street friend." Elijah did not answer. He ran down the sidewalk after Nathan, calling Mr. Nate. Nathan kept walking slower than he could have, letting the distance stretch. Elijah caught up half a block later, slightly out of breath, and placed the wallet in his hand. "You drop this." Nathan opened it, checked the photograph, and let his thumb linger on Ruth's face. Elijah noticed the tenderness in the gesture. "Is that your wife?" Nathan nodded. "Was. I'm sorry." "So am I," Nathan said. Elijah looked back toward the building. He had just challenged his older brother in front of employees and press. There would be consequences for him. Nathan knew it. Elijah knew it too. "Still," Elijah said, "there wasn't much money in there, but that doesn't mean it wasn't valuable." Nathan closed the wallet. "No, it doesn't." That sentence ended the test in Nathan's heart, but not in law. He still needed to prepare the company for what was coming. He could not simply announce Elijah and expect the board to accept it without structure. Kingston Group had become too large for sentiment, and Nathan respected that. He spent the next 3 days working with Clara, outside counsel, and 2 trusted directors who had known him since the early freight years. They reviewed succession authority, voting shares, operating control, trust restrictions, and the family employment agreements Marcus and Jordan had signed without reading carefully because they assumed blood made them untouchable. The old documents carried Ruth's influence. Years earlier, after watching a cousin nearly destroy a family business through entitlement, Ruth had insisted Nathan create a morality clause for executive control. It did not strip descendants of lawful inheritance. She was not cruel. But it separated wealth from stewardship. A Kingston could receive money by birth, but authority had to be earned through conduct. Nathan had laughed at the wording then, calling it dramatic. Ruth had told him that families with too much money needed dramatic guardrails because ordinary shame stopped working after the first 100 million. Now those guardrails mattered. Marcus felt the danger before he understood it. After the wallet incident, he summoned Elijah into his office and closed the door. Nathan later watched the recording, not from hidden cameras planted for drama, but from the standard security system every executive knew existed in common corporate areas. Marcus stood behind his desk and told Elijah he had embarrassed the family. He said leadership required hierarchy. He said poor people were not holy just because they were poor. Elijah answered that basic decency was not worship. Marcus slammed his palm on the desk and said Elijah would never run Kingston Group because he did not have the stomach to choose winners and losers. Elijah's reply was quiet. Maybe the problem is that you enjoyed choosing losers. Jordan tried a different approach. He invited Elijah to lunch at a private club and offered a brotherly warning. He said Marcus was dangerous when cornered. He said the board wanted confidence, not conscience. He said Elijah could become head of the foundation if he stopped making public scenes. It was a polished insult wrapped like a gift. Elijah thanked him for lunch and asked whether Jordan had seen Marcus take the wallet. Jordan looked away and said, "I saw a complicated moment." Elijah said, "No. You saw a simple moment and made it complicated so you wouldn't have to do the right thing." By then, Nathan no longer wondered who should inherit leadership. He wondered whether announcing it would destroy what remained of the family. That was the final ache. He loved Marcus and Jordan. Love did not make him blind. It made the truth hurt more. He knew their weaknesses had roots. Marcus had spent his childhood hearing adults say he would carry the family one day until affection and pressure became tangled in him. Jordan had learned that charm could keep him safe when grief made the house unpredictable after their father died. Both boys had turned survival habits into weapons. Nathan could see the wound and still refused to hand them a kingdom. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at 9 in the morning. The official notice said the agenda concerned succession planning and governance continuity. That was enough to set the entire building vibrating. Executives whispered in elevators, assistants speculated over coffee, financial media gathered in the lobby before sunrise. Marcus arrived early, wearing the expression of a man preparing to accept what he believed was overdue. Jordan arrived with a statement already drafted in case the announcement favored him. Elijah arrived last, carrying no speech, wearing the same Navy suit he wore to ordinary operations reviews. Nathan did not enter with them. At 9 exactly, Clara stood at the head of the boardroom table. She had served Nathan for 31 years and could silence a room by removing her glasses. Around the table sat family members, directors, legal counsel, senior executives, and the 3 grandsons. Nathan's empty chair waited at the far end. Marcus checked his watch. Jordan glanced toward the media team positioned discreetly outside. Elijah looked at Clara and sensed something unusual in her face, not fear but grief held in discipline. Clara said Mr. Kingston asked that we begin with a review of character evidence relevant to executive succession. Marcus laughed once. Character evidence. Is this a board meeting or Sunday school? No one answered. The doors opened. The old lottery seller walked in. For a few seconds, irritation moved around the table. Several people thought security had made an impossible mistake. Marcus pushed back his chair, furious. Jordan's smile froze. Elijah stood confused and concerned, as if ready to help the old man find his way out. Nathan walked slowly to the front of the room, his wet-looking raincoat hanging loose, lottery pouch against his chest, cheap cap pulled low. Marcus exploded first. Who let him in here? Nathan stopped behind the chairman's chair. He looked at Marcus, then Jordan, then Elijah. His hands rose to the cap. He removed it. Then he peeled away the gray beard. Clara stepped forward and helped him out of the old raincoat, revealing a dark, tailored suit beneath it, perfectly fitted, unmistakably his. The room lost its breath. Jordan whispered grandfather. Marcus did not speak. His face had gone pale in a way Nathan had never seen. Elijah stared as if his mind refused to connect the old man from the sidewalk with the grandfather who had taught him to ride a bicycle in the mansion driveway. Then pain crossed his face, not embarrassment, not fear, pain. "It was you," he said softly. Nathan nodded. "It was me." The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded with every morning they had walked past him, every word they wished they had not said, every small act they thought had vanished into ordinary time. Nathan placed the lottery pouch on the boardroom table. The cheap plastic looked absurd against the polished wood, and that was why he had brought it. "I spent 2 weeks outside this building," Nathan said. "Not in the chairman's office, not behind tinted glass, outside, in the rain, on the sidewalk, in the place where our employees, vendors, guards, cleaners, drivers, applicants, and strangers meet the company before they ever see a balance sheet. I wanted to know what the Kingston name meant when no one knew I was attached to it." Clara dimmed the lights. Nathan did not play the evidence immediately. First, he spoke from memory. He described Marcus striking his hand away on his birthday request. He described Jordan dropping money on the ground and calling it help. He described Elijah returning the bill to his hand. He described Denise being told to become invisible. He described the city officers, the vendor permit, the wallet, the stolen bills, the silence of a brother who preferred reputation to truth, and the younger grandson who ran half a block because he understood that a poor man's wallet could hold more than money. Only then did Clara play the recordings. Not everything. Nathan refused to turn the meeting into entertainment. He showed enough. Marcus's contempt at the curb, Jordan's careful cruelty after the charity photo, Elijah buying coffee without knowing anyone important would hear about it, Marcus placing the wallet in his coat, Jordan looking away, Elijah holding out his hand and asking for it back. The evidence did not need dramatic music. The room supplied its own judgment. Marcus stood before the lights came back on. "This is entrapment." Nathan looked at him with tired eyes. "No, Marcus. Entrapment creates a crime. This revealed a habit." Jordan leaned forward, voice trembling under its polish. "Grandfather, you were disguised. We didn't know it was you." "That is the point," Nathan said. "You should not need a man to be your grandfather before you treat him like a human being." No one moved. Nathan turned to the whole room. "For years, this company has asked the public to trust us with freight housing data, infrastructure, and jobs. Trust is not built by clever men who smile on stages and despise people in private. Trust is built by those who understand power as responsibility. I do not need the smartest grandson in this chair. I do not need the loudest or the most photographed or the one most eager to inherit. I need the one who can stand in front of a person with nothing to offer him and still remember his own humanity." Marcus's voice cracked with anger. "So Elijah gets everything because he bought a few lottery tickets?" Nathan's face hardened. "No, Elijah does not get everything, and he did not earn leadership by buying tickets. He earned it by showing the same character repeatedly when there was no reward. He defended a vendor before investors. He challenged theft before cameras. He treated workers as people before he knew a board would care. Those are not gestures, those are instincts. A company follows the instincts of its leader." Then Nathan opened the folder in front of him. The legal counsel sat straighter. The directors already knew what was inside, but the family did not. Nathan explained the succession structure in plain language. Marcus and Jordan would receive the financial inheritance guaranteed to them through family trusts. Their children would remain protected. Nathan was not erasing them from the bloodline, but effective immediately, neither would be eligible for executive control voting leadership or board appointment within Kingston Group until completing a defined governance and ethics process approved by independent directors. Their current executive roles were suspended pending review of conduct toward employees, vendors, and company policy. Marcus looked as if the floor had dropped beneath him. For the first time in his adult life, the Kingston name did not open the door he wanted. Jordan's eyes filled, though whether from shame or fear, Nathan could not tell. He wanted to comfort them. He wanted to be only their grandfather and not the steward of thousands of workers' futures. But leadership often demanded love with a spine. Elijah stood slowly. "Grandfather, I never asked for this." "I know," Nathan said. "That is one reason I trust you with it. I don't want to take something from my brothers." Nathan's expression softened. "You are not taking it. They surrendered stewardship every time they treated people as disposable. You are receiving responsibility, not treasure." That distinction settled over the room. Responsibility, not treasure. Nathan repeated it because he wanted every executive present to hear it. Elijah would become Chief Executive Officer of Kingston Group after a 90-day transition, working with an independent operating committee and a board mentor Nathan trusted. He would not rule alone. He would be tested too, not by disguise, but by performance, humility, and accountability. Nathan had no interest in creating another prince. He wanted a leader. Elijah's first words as successor were not grand. He asked Denise from housekeeping to be brought into the meeting. The request startled the room. Clara smiled faintly and made the call. Denise arrived 10 minutes later, nervous, still in uniform, convinced she had done something wrong. When she saw Nathan at the head of the table and recognized the old lottery seller in his eyes, she covered her mouth. Nathan asked her to sit. Marcus could not look at her. Elijah stood and apologized to her in front of everyone, not for Marcus, as if he could clean another man's conscience, but on behalf of a company culture that had made her humiliation possible. Then he asked her to help lead a confidential worker dignity review across Kingston Group's offices and contracted services. Denise laughed once in disbelief. Elijah did not laugh. He told her she would be paid for the work, protected from retaliation, and partnered with outside labor advisors. That was the first change. The second came by noon. Elijah ordered an immediate review of cleaning, security, driving, and warehouse contracts to identify wage suppression hidden under efficiency language. Marcus called it reckless. Elijah replied that if the margins required underpaying invisible workers, the margins were lying. The phrase traveled through the company faster than the official announcement. The third change came that afternoon. Jordan's foundation campaign was paused and audited. Not canceled because the communities it served should not suffer for his hypocrisy, but rebuilt with local advisory boards that actually held power over grant decisions. Street vendors near Kingston properties received protected vending zones, permit assistance, weather shelters, and small business banking support. Nathan insisted the program not be named after him. Elijah named it the Ruth Kingston Street Enterprise Fund because Ruth had been the one who never let the family forget where the money came from. The media, of course, wanted the scandal. They wanted the slap, the dropped bill, the wallet, the disguised billionaire. Those clips spread fast. Commentators argued over whether Nathan had been too harsh or exactly harsh enough. Some called Elijah a saint, which made him uncomfortable. Some called Marcus and Jordan victims of an unfair test, which made Nathan laugh without humor. The public always loved a dramatic reveal, but inside the company, the quieter consequences mattered more. Drivers began receiving back pay for misclassified routes. Night cleaners got direct reporting lines when executives mistreated them. Vendor contracts were rewritten in language small business owners could understand without hiring expensive lawyers. The lobby policy changed too. No employee, no matter how senior, could remove a licensed vendor from public frontage for image reasons. That rule seemed small, but Nathan knew culture lived in small permissions. Cruelty often entered through doors labeled convenience. Marcus did not accept the decision gracefully. For weeks, he refused to speak to Elijah except through lawyers. He told friends Nathan had gone sentimental after the heart attack. He tried to rally directors around concerns that Elijah lacked edge. But every attempt exposed the same weakness Nathan had seen outside the building. Marcus thought fear was the same as respect. When independent auditors reviewed his division, they found no major theft, no criminal conspiracy, nothing that would make headlines for months. What they found was colder and more common a pattern of squeezing the least powerful people first because they were easiest to ignore. That finding hurt Marcus more than a scandal might have. A scandal could be blamed on enemies. A pattern had his handwriting all over it. Nathan met with him privately only once during that period. Marcus arrived angry, armed with arguments. Nathan let him finish. Then he placed the old lottery ticket Marcus had knocked away on the desk between them. It had dried wrinkled, the ink slightly blurred. "You think I wanted you to fail?" Nathan said. Marcus looked away. "I wanted you to make this difficult. I wanted evidence that I had misjudged you. I stood in that rain hoping my eldest grandson would surprise me." For the first time, Marcus's anger faltered. Beneath it, Nathan saw the boy again, frightened of not being enough. Marcus whispered, "You made me compete for you my whole life." Nathan closed his eyes. There it was, not an excuse, a root. He accepted the truth of it because leadership also meant admitting the damage you helped create. "Yes," he said, "I did, and I am sorry. But pain does not give you the right to pass humiliation down to people who cannot fight back." Marcus did not apologize that day. Nathan had not expected him to. Real humility rarely arrives on schedule. Jordan's fall was quieter. Without the company's media machine under his control, his charm had nowhere to perform. The audit of the foundation revealed careless spending on image management, luxury donor events, and consulting fees that did more for reputation than communities. Nothing dramatic enough for prison, enough to prove he had mistaken appearing generous for being useful. When Elijah offered him a path back through direct service work with no cameras and no title, Jordan laughed bitterly and refused. 2 months later, he accepted. Not because he had transformed overnight, but because the world outside applause was lonelier than he expected. Elijah struggled too. The public loved the story of the kind grandson chosen by the billionaire, but the actual work was heavier than admiration. Kindness did not make supply chain delays vanish. It did not make shareholders patient. It did not make every employee honest or every decision simple. Some weeks, he came home exhausted, wondering if Marcus had been right about him lacking the stomach for hard choices. Nathan watched him learn the difference between softness and mercy. Mercy listened, softness avoided. Elijah had to fire people. He had to close a failing division. He had to say no to friends. The test had proven his character, not spared him from difficulty. What made Nathan proud was not that Elijah avoided pain. It was that he refused to become cruel in order to survive it. When a warehouse closure became unavoidable, Elijah stood in front of the workers himself and explained the numbers without hiding behind jargon. He arranged transfers where possible, severance beyond the legal minimum, job placement support, and transportation stipends for families who would be hit hardest. Some people still cursed him, some still cried. Leadership did not guarantee gratitude. Elijah accepted that. Afterward, he sat alone in the empty warehouse for nearly an hour, not because cameras were there, but because loss deserved witnesses. Nathan saw the company changing in ways outsiders might never notice. Executives began learning the names of security guards because Elijah did. Board packets started including human impact notes beside financial projections. The foundation stopped hosting glossy dinners and started holding meetings in church basements, community colleges, union halls, and small restaurants where people spoke plainly because no one had arranged them as background decoration. Denise became one of the most trusted voices in the Worker Review Council. She still cleaned part-time by choice, for a while, then moved into employee advocacy full-time, where she scared senior managers more effectively than any consultant Nathan had ever hired. One morning, almost a year after the rainy test, Nathan returned to the sidewalk outside Kingston Group. This time he wore his own coat and walked with a cane Elijah had finally convinced him to use. Near the entrance stood a row of licensed vendors under new awnings selling coffee, newspapers, flowers, breakfast biscuits, and, yes, lottery tickets. The city looked different from under shelter. A vendor named Mr. Alvarez waved Nathan over and tried to give him a ticket for free. Nathan refused and paid double. Elijah arrived a few minutes later, not from a luxury car but on foot from a meeting 2 blocks away. He saw Nathan holding the ticket and smiled. Still chasing luck? Nathan shook his head. No, just remembering where it hides. They stood together watching employees enter the building. Some were executives, some were cleaners, some were interns wearing shoes too new for their first week. Most had no idea how close the company had come to being handed to men who saw them as background. That was the strange thing about good decisions at the top. If made well, many people never knew the disaster they had escaped. Elijah asked, "Do you ever regret doing it that way?" Nathan looked at the doors, at the stone name above them, at the city that had once ignored him and later applauded him with the same mouth. "I regret that it was necessary," he said. "I don't regret learning the truth." Then he handed Elijah the lottery ticket. Elijah read the numbers and laughed. "Granddad, this probably won't win anything." Nathan smiled. It already did. In time, Marcus began the ethics process he had once mocked. Not because he became gentle overnight, and not because the family suddenly healed in a neat circle. Some wounds stayed complicated. Some dinners remained tense. But Marcus eventually visited a distribution center without cameras and listened to drivers explain what his cost cuts had done to their lives. He did not defend himself. That was the beginning. Jordan spent 6 months working with the Street Enterprise Fund, anonymously reviewing permit applications and meeting vendors who could spot fake humility faster than investors could spot market risk. He struggled without applause. That was also a beginning. Nathan did not confuse beginnings with redemption. He had lived too long for easy endings, but he took comfort in the fact that consequences had opened a door punishment alone could not. Marcus and Jordan still had money. They still had the Kingston name. What they no longer had was the illusion that the name made them worthy. That loss was painful. It was also the first honest inheritance Nathan had given them. As for Elijah, he never framed the first lottery ticket. People suggested it. A magazine wanted to photograph it on his desk as a symbol of his rise. He refused. The ticket was not a trophy. It was a reminder of a man in the rain, and a question every leader answers daily when power does not require you to be kind. Will you be kind anyway? He kept the ticket folded inside his wallet beside a photograph of Nathan and Ruth from 1974. Not for luck, for direction. Years later, when Nathan's health declined and he spent more mornings at home than at the office, he asked Elijah to drive him through the old South Side neighborhood where he had grown up. The house with the leaking roof was gone, replaced by a small apartment building. The corner store had become a pharmacy. The bus station where he once shined shoes was now surrounded by traffic and glass. Cities change. Memory does not always keep up. They parked near a diner that had somehow survived everything. Nathan ordered coffee he was not supposed to drink. Elijah pretended not to notice. For a while they sat without speaking. Then Nathan said, "You know why I chose the lottery tickets?" Elijah said, "Because you used to sell them." "That's part of it. What's the other part?" Nathan turned the paper cup slowly between his hands. A lottery ticket is a strange thing. Most of the time it's worth nothing, but people buy it because they believe hidden inside something small might be a future they can't yet see. I wanted to know which of you could look at something small and not treat it as worthless. Elijah swallowed. "You mean the ticket?" Nathan looked at him. "I mean the man selling it." That was the lesson Nathan had spent a lifetime trying to protect. Money could be transferred. Buildings could be renamed. Shares could move from one trust to another with signatures and seals. But character could not be wired into an account. It had to be practiced when no one applauded. It had to be chosen when impatience would be easier. It had to bend down in the rain, pick up a stranger's money and place it back in his hand. Nathan Kingston did not save his family by pretending to be poor. He saved it by forcing the rich to reveal what poverty looked like to them. Marcus saw an inconvenience. Jordan saw a prop. Elijah saw a person. That was the entire inheritance test, hidden inside one wet morning and one small ticket. And maybe that is why the story stayed with people long after the headlines faded. Not because a billionaire wore a raincoat, not because two arrogant heirs were embarrassed in a boardroom. Those things were dramatic, but drama is not the same as meaning. The meaning was simpler and harder to escape. Every day, in ways that feel too small to matter, people show what they would do with power before they ever receive it. The way we treat someone who cannot reward us may be the clearest signature we leave on the world. A dropped bill, a wet sidewalk, a trembling hand, a stranger asking for help. These moments do not look like destiny when they arrive. They look ordinary. That is why they are dangerous. That is why they are holy. Because the future is often decided before the boardroom, before the announcement, before the applause. Sometimes it is decided by whether we can still recognize a human being when they have nothing to give us back. If you believe kindness is not weakness, but the deepest form of strength, leave a comment and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because money can be inherited, titles can be assigned, and power can be signed over in ink. But the right to lead belongs to the person who still knows how to bend down, hold out a hand, and protect the dignity of someone the world was ready to ignore.